A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back once again to the First Impressions. Yeah, so, consider this a bonus for the remainder of March 2025, as we have, after all, gotten a lot of different games over the last month or so, and I will say, it's probably best that I could take a break from it, or better yet, just go back to twice a month, at least for the time being. I'm sure only time will tell if I really do have to take a break from this for some time. But until that happens, why don't we go ahead and talk a bit about Assassin's Creed Shadows. Yeah, I bet you some probably haven't already known about this, but there's been a lot of talks about Ubisoft and the fact that Assassin's Creed has carried over to many different prequels, sequels, and other points in the series to the point where it truly has formed a massive timeline. In fact, they don't exactly consider some of the older Assassin's Creed series, including the Ezio collection, to be truly part of the canonical timeline. Of course, we know that some pieces in the Assassin's Creed series and the mythology from within would include titles like Odyssey, Origins, Valhalla, and Mirage, but with the addition of Shadows basically taking us to a point in ancient Japan in the 16th century, this has basically come to a point where some might project a series of arguments on what could they possibly do for the next installment. Maybe something a little more on the modern contemporary side. I mean, that would be interesting to see if Assassin's Creed 2029 or 2030, I kind of would want to see something like that. You know? Because if Ubisoft actually is going out of business at some point because of all this nonsense they're trying to project, then so be it. It's better to be off with some horrible people rather than have them stick around for a long time. Yeah, looking at others out there, like Blizzard, Mindscape, it's just impressive how they actually managed to live for this long without actually getting shut down. Anyways, though, Assassin's Creed Shadows, in spite of the things that I've mentioned earlier, and in spite of the things that people are talking about at this moment, there's still a bit of a problem that I have to address here before we get to the main story at hand. There's actually a little something there that allows us to scroll between the many installments in the current Assassin's Creed timeline. Yeah, because after all, Ubisoft has had the franchise for some time now, especially with all this time that's passed since day one in the mid to late 2000s. Assassin's Creed as a whole does have the timeline set up with staples including Odyssey, Origins, Mirage, Valhalla, and Shadows. But all of this basically is just the basin for what the timeline itself situates us. Because get this, we're basically given a more digitized showcase of every current sector in the timeline, including a certain voice/manifestation figure known as the Guide.
Aberrations.
I really gotta wonder, what exactly is the point of the Guide? Is this basically just some sort of history lesson that we're being taught in the middle of school? Is this just some kind of joke that Ubisoft is gonna pull out just because there's all this talk about them going out of business? I don't even know at this point. It's fair to say that I might as well just stop with the Assassin's Creed stuff after today. But in any case though, the story of Shadows basically at first takes us to a certain temple in which that a small group of visitors, they make way to some sort of monk leader in which that, get this, an African individual is brought about to Japan in order to find himself, discover himself. And wouldn't you know, they actually find potential in him. That's quite a way to go, don't you think? But it gets even more interesting as time goes on, because eventually we're led towards a female character. I might as well make it clear here. In the 16th century, it was quite a time to be alive. If you were POC or female, it was quite a time to be alive. Compared to today, when both of these things are so abundant that they're probably never going to stop coming. But otherwise, it truly is important to note here that in addition to one character who's basically become a samurai, you have one character whom is in fact a shinobi ninja. One thing that I might as well take note here, for any of you guys who aren't curious enough, samurais and ninjas are not the same thing. Samurais are honorable warriors, armored, and in fact, feasible with many types of weaponry, including swords, forged in their own right. While ninjas are more of the covert and assassin variety. And you know, this actually was quite an idea for Assassin's Creed to put together. Ninjas were indeed the assassins of ancient Japan. And so, the idea of the shinobi carrying over to the Assassin's Creed mythology as a whole is rather ingenious. The title Assassin's Creed needed an assassin from ancient Japan to really tie it all together. Well, I'm glad Ubisoft got that one right. Absolutely right. But for the most part though, this shinobi in particular that we're talking about here was actually a member of the Iga clan. That's Iga, I-G-A. Yeah. But what happens is that at first we are given some steps as to how to work with the game. We're given the gameplay style, the camera perspective, movements, button controls, the ability to crouch and go prone, hiding in the grass bushes, assassination techniques, the ability to go up onto the rooftops as a means to get a view from above, or to simply scout ahead for any kind of enemies that may be in the area nearby. It's a lot of the same sort of stuff that Assassin's Creed Mirage gave us, but taking us to the Middle East as opposed to being taken to Japan, that's quite a transcension and a nice way to move on from one point of the timeline to the next. After all, I've mentioned that Assassin's Creed Mirage takes place during the 9th century, while we're basically about 700 years into the future with Shadows. Anyways, though, this Iga shinobi, guess what happens to her? She goes and finds some sort of box. A box that her old master had basically wanted her to claim. But after doing so, she, as well as Chishui, whom is the name of her master slash adoptive father, they basically get ambushed by a group of warriors. Samurai who were in fact after the box. What is inside that box? Well, I can't really say for sure. Unfortunately though, both are mortally wounded. And while Nagagoe, the name of the shinobi, is basically tended to by a person known as Shonin, as well as his young son. She basically spends a lot of time recovering and eventually giving us some backstory in the form of some dreams that she experienced. There are in fact some sessions within the game, believe it or not, where you can actually revisit certain portions of her past. So that way, we can get a first-hand look at what she's capable of doing and to help remind her of who she is as a warrior of the Iga clan, and more importantly, as the shinobi of Japan. But of course, just like with Mirage, Valhalla, and whatnot, Shadows more or less takes us to the similar linear style of storytelling, open world exploration, resource gathering, assassination and stealth tactics, and loads of other things that happen within the game. Every Assassin's Creed story that we've had in like the last decade seems to take us to a similar, if not identical point, where every game just happens to be more of the same thing. It's a lot like how the Call of Duty series has evolved. Sure, they might add a few things every now and then, update the gameplay, and give us some newer things to work with. That's mostly talking about multiplayer, zombies, and other extra modes that may be available. But in the case of Assassin's Creed, the only real changes that we seem to have here are the setting, characters, and storyboard as a whole. But a lot of the same gameplay, mechanics, and engine running are all the same sort of thing. I mean, it's a third-person perspective. It's a series of climbing and crouching and dodging and attacking and defending and occasionally mounting up on your horse or whatever animal that you mount with. And then, of course, it's a lot of the same sort of things that you might work with in terms of weapons, items, and resources that you gather. Also work with some rations and occasionally snuff food out from nearby receptacles to fill your health. And on top of all that, it's that similar list of things that you got to do here. A lot of objectives that are mainly laid out in the form of a large board in a way, where there's basically just large rings centered around different subjects. We're basically given a whole list of all of the different hostile characters that Nagagoid has to deal with, along with the rest of whatever army that she's gathering here. And I will admit I've already taken down 3 of them in the gameplay that I've sought so far. I must have played through around 7 hours worth. But by this point in time, we might as well make it clear. Assassin's Creed sure is monotonous. Yes, I said that. Monotonous. Hold it for eternity. Anyways, though, for what it is, at least, it actually does reel me into the point where I feel very much immersed in the storyline, and the unique dialogue that's exchanged between the characters also doesn't really give me any time for complaints or boredom. But again, with all this repetitive nature that the Assassin's Creed series has given us so far, with every game seemingly performing the exact same way and functioning in the exact same way, I can't really be sure if a good scoring is necessary here. But Shadows does at least give us the unique experience of going through ancient Japan. But then again, remember Sony's Ghost of Tsushima? That was 5 years ago, believe it or not. And considering the fact that we're actually going to be getting another game from them known as Ghost of Yotei, I can't really imagine if Shadows was actually going to try and capitalize on the success before the game even comes out. I can't even be sure if Yotei is going to be in any ways different than Tsushima, or if Shadows was in fact... Again, I just can't even be sure about that at this point. So, there's just a lot going on with this whole thing revolving around such a big series that's been around for almost 20 years. Just think. Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty, Minecraft, Rocket League, Destiny. These series have sure gotten as huge as they could have possibly gotten today, carrying over for at least a decade in each consecutive bit. But you know what though? We at least just got to point out the facts here. That Shadows does at least feel immersive and at least like a welcome addition here, because of the idea of the ninja being an assassin. Being put in an Assassin's Creed game, that alone is quite a way to sell out. And considering the fact that it got me my money, well, I don't know what else to say about it at this point. So, scoring of Assassin's Creed Shadows at this point is probably only going to end up at a somewhat medial 6.1 out of 10.1. So, not too often do I get into scoring of this level, but I get the feeling that some days I'm going to be seeing more content like this and experiencing more content like this. But other than that, I'm more than sure that I can get through this game probably even better than what I did with Mirage. I practically quit that game after defeating the 5th boss. But anyways, that's just pretty much all I want to do here for now. I'll be back with more first impressions content at some point in the future. But if you want to see more go down to my channel, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side.